Hello everyone, this is Afternoon Live. I'm Ben Brown. Two Russian nationals have been named as suspects in the attempted murder of the former Russian spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia. Police say there is sufficient evidence to charge Ruslan Bashirov and Alexander Petrov over the poison attack in Salisbury in March, and says they are also linking them to the subsequent poisonings of Dawn Sturgis, who died, and Charlie Rowley. Well, a European arrest warrant for the men has now been issued, but there's no chance of the pair being extradited from Russia. That is prohibited by the Russian constitution. Well, Scotland Yard have provided extensive details about the attack on the Skripals, and in the Commons, the Prime Minister has been briefing MPs and saying that Britain has established that both men are agents with the Russian military intelligence service, the GRU. Richard Galpin reports.
These are the two men, both Russian nationals, who are suspected of poisoning Sergei and Yulia Skripal with the deadly nerve agent Novichok, named as Alexander Petrov and Ruslan Bashirov, although these are probably aliases. And the police investigation has video footage showing their movements from the moment they arrived at Gatwick Airport on March the 2nd, 2 days before the poisoning. From Gatwick, they travelled to East London, staying in a hotel where investigators found traces of Novichok, although those traces soon faded. On Saturday, March the 3rd, they travelled by train to Salisbury, where it's alleged they carried out reconnaissance before returning to London. On Sunday, the 4th of March, they again travelled to Salisbury by train and were seen near the Skripals' house just before midday. It's alleged this was around the time that Novichok nerve agent was sprayed on the door handle. Later that day, they were seen at Heathrow Airport, where they boarded an Aeroflot flight to Moscow. Salisbury was soon turned into a major crime scene after it was discovered nerve agent had been used to try to kill the former Russian military intelligence officer Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia. But they survived, and the investigation has gathered enough evidence to bring charges against the two suspects.
Today's announcement by the Crown Prosecution Service marks the most significant development in this investigation. We now have sufficient evidence to bring charges in relation to the attack on Sergei and Yulia Skripal in Salisbury, and domestic and European arrest warrants have been issued for the two suspects, and we will be seeking to circulate Interpol red notices.
And in the House of Commons earlier today, another huge announcement, this time from the Prime Minister.
The government has concluded that the two individuals named by the police and CPS are officers from the Russian Military Intelligence Service, also known as the GRU. The GRU is a highly disciplined organisation with a well-established chain of command. So this was not a rogue operation. It was almost certainly also approved outside the GRU at a senior level of the Russian state.
But as for putting Alexander Petrov and Ruslan Bashirov on trial in this country, there is no prospect of that. Russia does not extradite its own nationals who are accused of crimes in other countries. Richard Galpin, BBC News at New Scotland Yard.
Well, our correspondent John Kay is in Salisbury and has been following the story for us this afternoon.
That's right, Ben. It's exactly 6 months this week since Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia collapsed in the centre of Salisbury, and almost since that moment their property here has been a crime scene. It's still sealed off, it's still empty, and it is still a reminder for people in this neighbourhood and in this city about the extraordinary events that have gone on here. And during those 6 months there have been theories, there have been rumours, there have been ideas and thoughts, but nothing really definite about the police case. And a lot of people here wondered, how much progress were the authorities in the UK actually making? How much did they really know, or at least how much did they suspect about who had done this and how? And despite that, after all this conjecture, all these theories, suddenly this morning a blizzard of information, not just information, but pictures of suspects, names, ages, addresses, places, CCTV, where they spent the night, precise details of journeys to and from London into Salisbury, train times. It's quite a lot for people around here to take in, but I think it's also, what people are saying is that it's quite reassuring, and that at least they now know that progress in the investigation has been made, even if no actual charges have formally been brought, because these men have not been arrested.
And quite chilling also, I suppose, for the residents of Salisbury to suddenly see the faces of the men that the police believe were the attackers who carried Novichok into the city of Salisbury.
And pictures of them in Salisbury as well. Let's remind you that the two images that we've had, these mugshots, if you like, of the two individuals, they've been named as Alexander Petrov and Ruslan Boshirov, although the authorities here in the UK say they suspect those are false names, that those are aliases. But they've released these images, close-up headshots of these two men, and the Prime Minister, as we've just heard her in the House of Commons in the last hour or so, saying that the authorities here believe they are Russian military intelligence operatives, although of course the Russian state has always denied any involvement in what happened here. But yes, people in Salisbury and of course in Amesbury, where Charlie Rowley and his partner Dawn Sturgis were also taken ill 3 months later. Of course, she sadly died, an innocent victim in all of this. People in both these communities can now see pictures of these two men, not just the mugshots, but we've got pictures of them arriving into Gatwick Airport on the Friday night, leaving out of Heathrow on the Sunday afternoon, using the trains between London and Salisbury, and on the streets here of Salisbury just minutes before and after what the police say was the attack here at the front door of the Skripal's home. So it's an awful lot really for people in Salisbury to take in. All of a sudden they've got all this information, all these pictures, and of course that's crucial because what the police are doing, the reason they've released of this, and it's partly political to say, look, we're onto this, we've got proof. This, you know, we're not just making these claims from nothing. We have the information. This is what it's based on. But what the authorities will also be hoping is that these images might trigger more information, that maybe somebody in this community remembers seeing those two individuals. Maybe somebody might have dash cam footage, or there might be something else that might account for missing moments during this investigation, which builds up the picture yet more fully. So as well as releasing this, the police today are appealing for the public to come forward with any extra information that they might be able to add, any more jigsaw pieces that can be contributed.
And just briefly, John, also more information about this perfume bottle, or fake perfume bottle, that was used to carry the Novichok, it seems.
That's right. We knew that Charlie Rowley had said in interviews after he came out of hospital during the summer that he'd picked up what he thought was a normal perfume bottle, maybe in a bin somewhere in the centre of Salisbury, and that was believed to have contained Novichok, and that accidentally contaminated him and his girlfriend, Dawn Sturgis, who later died. Well, we've now got images of that Nina Ricci Parfait Jour bottle of perfume. It looks like a real bottle of perfume, but the police are saying it's counterfeit, it's fake. It looks like it was sealed in some way. It's not known whether it was fully sealed when Charlie Rowley apparently found it, or whether it was partly sealed. But I think it's crucial for the police to try to establish where was that bottle of what looked like perfume between the Skripals being poisoned here in March and Charlie Rowley finding it, we think, in June. Did it sit in a bin for 3 months, or was it somewhere in between? And maybe by finding those missing jigsaw pieces we were talking about, that might allow members of the public to help the authorities in trying to maybe establish where it was in between and who might have put it there.
That's John Kay, our correspondent. Let's talk now to the Conservative MP for the constituency of Salisbury, John Glenn. Thank you very much for being with us, Mr. Glenn. So we have the faces of these suspects. We have all the details about what they did. But the reality is they're never going to be arrested or put on trial, are they? They're not. They're in Russia. They're never going to be. They can't be extradited because that's against the Russian constitution, and they probably won't ever leave Russia, so they'll never be arrested.
Well, I think we should think first about the massive step forward this is in actually finding out who's done this. The people in Salisbury for 6 months have been asking questions. They've today been given very clear evidence. I wouldn't, in answer to your question, say that they will never face justice. The fact is we've issued a European arrest warrant. We have made very clear what happened, and we'll be making that very clear, as the Prime Minister said in the House of Commons, what happened to our allies. If they ever leave Russia, they will face arrest by Interpol, and I hope that further action will be taken, given how serious an intervention this is into our life, a way of life in this country.
How shocking is it for you to see the faces of these men who the police believe, you know, were walking the streets of your constituency with Novichok?
It is shocking. I pay tribute, though, to the police and the counter-terrorism network who've been working under difficult circumstances Everyone's been desperate to get a picture of what's been happening. They've worked incredibly hard over the last 6 months to make this announcement today. So I'm very grateful for that progress and to bring clarity to the events. I was very frustrated that people were questioning what happened, and I'm now pleased that concrete evidence with pictures, with movements, with train times, with details of what they did, how they did it and when they did it, made clear to the public transparently today.
And is that level of detail, that level of evidence useful for Britain in persuading people around the world who may have doubted whether Russia was actually behind this attack, for convincing them that Russia was and that it needs to be punished?
Well, I condemn the Russian state for what they did, and I'm disappointed that some in the House of Commons, notably the leader of the opposition, was unable to do that. I'm sure there'll be some that will willfully want to resist pointing the finger at the Russian state, even though the evidence is so clear and compelling. What we can do is socialise that information to our allies. Those that were sceptical in March can now be reassured, and those that stood with us can be vindicated in the action that they took. To have over 150 diplomats from 28 countries removed in the single biggest action of removal of diplomats does say something about how strong the case was from the start. But I'm pleased that this has now been made available to the public at large and to my constituents in Salisbury who've suffered a lot, leave alone the suffering of the family of Dawn Sturgis, who sadly lost her life as a consequence of the actions of these two individuals.
Indeed. OK, John Glenn, thank you so much for talking to us, the Conservative MP for the constituency of Salisbury. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's join our chief political correspondent, Vicky Young, who's at Westminster for us. And Vicky, you were watching as the Prime Minister made that dramatic announcement to MPs with all the details about what these two suspects had done, and then revealed that the British authorities believe that these two work for the Russian Military Intelligence Service, the GRU. What has been the reaction of MPs to that news?
Well, as you say, it was a pretty dramatic announcement. Of course, the news that first came out back in March when really Parliament was stunned by what they were hearing. But now this evidence that's built up, this prosecution, if it ever becomes that, and the pursuing of these two men. Now, as it was back in March, the case is still that the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn is being accused of Weasley words. That's how Boris Johnson, the former Foreign Secretary, described it. He said Jeremy Corbyn wasn't being robust enough in condemning the Russian state and their involvement in all of this. Now, afterwards, a Labour spokesman was asked whether Mr Corbyn regretted the approach he had taken back in March and now by not going further. And he said, no, actually, that's not the case at all. He said that Jeremy Corbyn has always looked at the evidence and had a proportionate response to all of this, and is saying that clearly now the evidence is built up, that Mr Corbyn himself has had a security briefing, one this morning, and he will have others on this whole case. And actually, they say there is now more evidence which points much more directly to Russian culpability. And they say that Jeremy's approach has always been based on evidence, and saying that Mr Corbyn clearly accepts what the Prime Minister said today, that the suspects are GRU officers. Now, in terms of what more action can be taken, the Prime Minister's official spokesman saying that actually the expulsion of people, Russians, from this country back in March was disrupting the GRU network here. They've also brought in a new power, which means that the authorities can look at people coming in from flights from Russia, something that didn't happen before. So they are saying that more action is being taken, but they will be looking at EU counterparts and saying we need more sanctions as well.
Vicky, thank you very much indeed. Vicky Young there, our chief political correspondent. Well, let's talk more about the police investigation into this case. And we're joined now by Mick Neville, who's the former head of the Metropolitan Police's Central Forensic Images team. Thank you very much for being with us. I mean, it's an incredible amount of detail that has been provided on these suspects, and a lot of pictures of them, CCTV pictures. How hard will it have been for police to put all that detail together and to establish who they are?
Well, it would have taken a lot of time to view the CCTV. I mean, it shows how vital CCTV is, but the Met are using super recognisers these are humans with an amazing ability to remember and match faces. So it would have taken a long, long time. Perhaps, you know, in this day and age you can use analytics and all sorts of machines to try and sift through evidence. I imagine that all that evidence was done literally by hand, by officers viewing, the super recognisers viewing, and they'd have to watch thousands of hours at the airport and the railway stations and the rest, and try to match the men, the same people in the different locations.
So these super recognisers that you're talking about, these are people who've just got an incredible ability to remember faces. We're not just talking about technology, face recognition technology, we're talking about humans with that ability to recognise other human faces.
Absolutely. So if you look at many of the pictures, as I have done, and you've shown on the show, that many of those images would be unsuitable for automated facial recognition because they're not like passport photographs, not straight on. Some of them are the back of the people. So human super recognisers are people who, it's less than 1% of the population, they've just got an innate ability. You can't train it, you're born with it, and these are the people who are absolutely exceptional at looking through CCTV and matching suspects or finding victims.
This must have been, as you say, very challenging because there were presumably thousands and thousands of hours of CCTV to trawl through.
I mean, it shows the dedication as well of the counter-terrorism team. So, yes, you would trawl through. And when I ran the investigation into the images and CCTV for the London riots, we had 100,000 hours of CCTV. You've got to divide it up. You've got to decide what's the priority. You've got to task the teams. And, of course, what the Met have done, they've used the right individuals they will have made the job a lot quicker. On murder cases, I found that using super recognisers was much more efficient than just trusting anybody to watch CCTV.
And how does it work? Once you've picked out, or think you've picked out the faces of the suspects, then that provides you with a new impetus to go and then find those same faces in other bits of CCTV. Is that how it works?
Absolutely. I mean, there may have been suspicions, like they've named these men, they put the mugshots of these men out. Did these authorities suspect that these men that would have made the job easier if the super recognisers were given faces to remember. Otherwise, they would have just trawled through all the footage and trying to play what we used to call it face snapping in the super recogniser unit, where you actually try and snap or match the images from, look at all the flights coming in from Russia, look at all the images from Salisbury, can we have a snap, can we match anybody on those footage? And that's what they've obviously done, that, and they've done it very well.
And of course it shows again how useful CCTV in general is to the police. I mean, years ago this kind of thing wouldn't have been possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So CCTV, it plays a vital role in solving crime. It's a massive help to the police, particularly when you get these serious crimes and you've got to piece together, you know, which hotel they're in, where they went to, the train. All those places may have been contaminated. So not only is it about solving crime, it's about public safety as well.
Good to talk to you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Mick
Neville there, former Detective Chief Inspector, who set up the Super Recognisers Unit back in 2011. You are watching Afternoon Live on BBC News, and these are our latest headlines. Police say they do have enough evidence to charge two Russian nationals, Alexander Petrov and Ruslan Bashirov, with conspiracy to murder the former Russian spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia. The Prime Minister says the suspects are Russian military intelligence officers. Investigators believe the alleged Salisbury attackers are back in Russia. They say there's no chance of them being extradited because that is prohibited by the Russian constitution, and Britain has summoned Russia's chargé d'affaires in London. The former governor of the Bank of England, Lord King, has condemned the UK's preparations for Brexit as incompetent.
And in sport, the European Ryder Cup captain Thomas Bjorn has named his 4 wildcards for the tournament later this month. He's gone with experience. Ian Poulter makes the 12-man team, alongside Sergio Garcia, Paul Casey and Henrik Stenson. The defending champion Rafael Nadal's through to the US Open semi-finals. He beat Dominic Thiem in 5 sets in just under 5 hours. He's going to play Juan Martín del Potro next, a repeat of last year's semi-final. And the England Rugby Union team are going to play at St James's Park next year, a one-off game against Italy, which will be a warm-up match for the World Cup in Japan. I'll be back in about 15 minutes with a full update. See you then.